In case you hadn't heard yet, ZOS is planning on making some sweeping changes to class balance and identity in The Elder Scrolls Online. I thought about making a video on it, but I knew that there would be a ton of videos on the topic by many other amazing ESO content creators. Instead, for my 100th video, I thought it might be a good idea to think about some things that I might want to see for my fellow healers. So, my name's Doc, your host for all things healing, and I wanted to make this little video just to discuss some talking points in the healing community, both from a class and a game perspective, as well as how we could possibly address these. So, let's get into this. Now, just one quick disclaimer before we get started. Of course, it goes without saying, but these are just my opinions. I don't want it to ever come across that I think I know better or that I have the final word in the healing community or anything like that. I'm a pretty darn good healer, but at the end of the day, I'm just some guy who makes videos on the internet for fun. There are plenty of other amazing healers in this community who may have opinions that differ from my own, and I encourage you to listen to them just as much as you'd listen to me. Whether you completely agree with everything I say or you think I have no idea what I'm talking about, know that I do respect your opinion, and I'd love to see those opinions in the comments so that maybe this video can act as kind of a healthy discourse space for healers. Anyway, enough about that. Let's move on to our first topic, which is not needing healers. That's right, we're starting off with some big ones. The not needing healers discussion has been in the game for a long time now, and in case you weren't aware, it revolves around the idea that most 4-man content doesn't require a healer, and you'd instead be better off having a third DPS. Now, is this true? Well, yes and no. I've touched on this topic before on the channel, but my take on it is basically that yes, in a fully optimized group where everyone knows what they're doing, most hard mode dungeons can be completed faster without a real healer. The key word there is optimized though, because if you're just doing your daily pledges with randoms, there's a good chance you'll run into many players who will absolutely need a healer, or at least benefit from having one. Obviously, as a healer main who enjoys healing, it's disheartening to know that I would need to play an entirely different role to be viable in a score-pushing dungeon team. The thing is, though, that there aren't really any good solutions to this issue that don't involve taking power away from players, which is usually understandably met with backlash. You could make enemies hit harder without going into one-shot territory, which I think would upset some people. You could reduce the effectiveness of self-healing in dungeons, which I think would definitely upset some people. Or you could redesign several of the game's bosses to deal out heavy, unblockable damage over time as opposed to one-shot attacks that we're used to. And honestly, I just don't think that's a feasible task for the developers. It's a complex issue that can't be solved with a simple solution, but I at least wanted to bring it up and be a voice for the healing community, many of whom, like me, wish that healers were more needed in 4-man content. Up next, I want to talk about minor heroism. So I think this has been one of the more common pain points for healers for a little while now. For those that don't know, minor heroism is a buff that generates one ultimate every 1.5 seconds for however long the buff lasts. The issue right now isn't the buff itself, but rather it's the sources in which you can acquire said buff. There are more than a few ways of getting it, but most of them involve class skills or champion points with terrible uptimes, or by using a set, and we don't want to sacrifice an entire set just for one buff. There are some decent scribe skills that we can use to give ourselves minor heroism, but healers don't really use scribing that often, and when we do, it's usually going to be for something more important than minor heroism. The best way, by far, to maintain a high uptime on heroism is just to use heroism potions. The ingredients to create these potions are most commonly found by taking down dragons and elsewhere, or you can just buy them from guild traders. Now, the problem with this is that since you're relying on a potion to provide this buff for healers, you have to keep farming the ingredients or buying them because you will eventually run out. This can be tedious and expensive for a lot of players who want to optimize their builds. In my humble opinion, it would make a lot of players happy to have some sort of skill or passive that can reasonably provide a 100% uptime on minor heroism. You want my suggestion? Put minor heroism on the Templar's Radiant Aura skill and call it a day. You can provide it for the entire team, so no one has to rely on potions or banners for minor heroism. I know that would probably tank the price of heroism pots, but honestly I think that would be a good thing as well. If your team comp doesn't involve someone running Radiant Aura, your healers would still be able to access Minor Heroism, but at a much more reasonable price. I don't know, these were just my initial thoughts on the topic. There may be a better solution to the Minor Heroism problem, but I just went with what I thought would be the best. Up next, I want to talk about Overhealing. Now, this one isn't really much of an issue per se, but something that I've talked about a couple times that I like to mention every now and then. If you don't use ESO logs a lot, a common trend in the healing community is that roughly 90 to 99% of the heals per second the average healer puts out is overhealing, meaning it's healing done after someone is already full health. As of this second, overhealing doesn't really do anything other than activating some sets and being a good way to measure your heal parse. I feel like it would be really rewarding for high-skill healers if overhealing offered some sort of tangible benefit that wasn't tied to a set. You could have a small portion of overhealing, I'm talking like 0.1% of overhealing, be converted into something like, weapon and spell damage, or resource recovery, or armor, or something along those lines. I know ZOS would have to be very careful implementing this as to not make it too strong, but still, I just like to throw it out there that rewarding high-skill healers I think would be really cool and would be a really nice thing for the healing community. Okay, now it's time to move on to individual classes. During this part, I'll mainly be focusing on their most popular skills and skill lines for healers and talking about ways that the class may be underperforming or overperforming in the healing role. I'll mostly be talking pretty broadly about this just to save time. I won't get too in-depth with a whole lot of topics, but when there are any specific changes that I think are very important and want to bring attention to, I'll do it here. So, first up, we've got the Arcanist. Now, personally, I think Arcanists are pretty good all-around healers and have some great shielding as well. I think the only reason we don't see curative runiforms more often is just that it tends to get overshadowed by other skill lines that are basically required in high-end content. Skill lines like Green Balance, Siphoning, Restoring Light all just take up spots because they all have one or two skills or passives that are basically required, whereas Curative Runiforms just doesn't have any skills like that. At least not anymore. Prior to update 46, the Xena's Empowering Disc Morph of the Arcanist Domain skill was a skill that you pretty much always want in your trial group due to the minor intellect, endurance, fortitude, and courage buffs that it provides. However, during the update 46 patch, Xena's had its target cap changed to only affect 6 players, making it still great for dungeons, but not so much for trials. Honestly, I think simply reverting this change and allowing Xena's to affect a full trial team once again could really let Curative Runiforms shine and help trial groups not have to worry about a source of minor courage anymore. Up next, we got the Dragonknight. You guys need some love, man. As it stands, Dragonknights just don't really have much that a healer would want. And what they do have is usually covered by tanks since DK is such a strong tank class. With Dragonknights being first on ZOS's list of classes to rework, I've seen some of the official and leaked changes, and while I really like what I'm seeing so far, I don't know if it will be enough to make DK healers able to compete with other class healers. I think what ZOS should focus on for DK healers is giving them healing and support that wouldn't already be covered by a DK tank. As of right now, a skill line like Earthen Heart actually isn't bad for healers, but it's not very optimal for a healer to take due to tanks already using Earthen Heart. So, part of the issue isn't necessarily just the lack of healing, but also the overlap with tanks. I'm not advocating for distinct healer tank DPS skill lines like the DLC classes, but I would like to see some skills and passives that are more oriented for healers and are separated from commonly used tank skills. I won't lie, it's probably going to take a lot of work, but I do think it would be really helpful for those who maybe commonly play the tank role and want to break into healing but don't want to roll an entirely new character to do so. Up next, we got the Necromancer. So, Necro healers are in kind of a good but weird spot right now. They are great at so many things, and you can never go wrong with having one. But, in terms of the meta, are outshined just a little bit by something else at almost every turn. The Bone Tyrant skill line offers fantastic ultimate generation, but the passives don't offer as much for healers as something like Siphoning does. The Gravelord skill line has an amazing support ultimate, but it's usually covered by tanks. Living Death has some awesome healing, but Restoring Light is better and easier to use. On top of that, I think Necro healers are also more complex to manage and are too reliant on factors that are outside of your control, such as corpse placement. If I had to make a suggestion for what we could do for Necro healers, my biggest suggestion would be to give them something unique from other healers. I know Living Death's ability to cleanse negative effects was supposed to be that thing, but there are so few encounters in the game that you actually need a cleanse that I wouldn't dedicate a whole skill line to it, especially when I could just use Extended Ritual or Purge instead. So, all in all, I think Necro healers are very valuable, but they just need something to make them stand out amongst their peers and make them more necessary for certain encounters. Up next, we've got the Nightblade. So, obviously, it goes without saying that Nightblades make fantastic healers, and that's due to the Siphoning skill line. Siphoning skill line contains some of the strongest ultimate generation in the game, and that's mainly due to the Catalyst passive, which provides a large amount of ultimate when using a potion. Since every player has access to potions at all times, Siphoning has become kind of a go-to healing line for pretty much every healing build. That has sort of become a double-edged sword for a lot of healers. On one hand, players who have a Nightblade healer can take some comfort in knowing that they can subclass into pretty much any healing build they want, since they'll always use Siphoning. On the other, the reliance on Siphoning has hurt the diversity of healer builds just a bit, and many healers don't enjoy having to juggle their potion cooldowns, which is only made worse when you use the optimal strategy of dedicating your jewelry traits and enchantments to reduce the cooldown timer of your potions. I can't say that I have a solution for this problem, because I'd like for healers to not have to be so reliant on Siphoning, but I also think nerfing the Catalyst passive too hard can make Siphoning obsolete. So, instead, I just wanted to bring attention to it, and hopefully just bringing some attention to it may lead to something. If you have any suggestions, please leave them down in the comments. Sorcerers, you guys are up next. So, since Update 46, Sorcerers have made good, albeit niche, healers. They excel in providing support for their team via Daedric Summoning with things like the Storm Atro and ult cost reduction. Where they do fall short is being a main healer. They just don't really have the skills or passives to be good at heal parsing. I think their biggest issues are the lack of heal over time skills and support-oriented passives. Sorcs, technically, only have, I think like 2 skills that aren't burst heals, and one of them is an ultimate. They do have some pretty decent shields though, so maybe you could, add some sort of heal over time effects to their shields or to their burst heals or something. Then, maybe you could just buff some of the weaker passives in each skill line with some additional healing or support. Once those things are sorted, I really could see Sorcerers being in a pretty good spot when it comes to healing. Up next, Templars, my main. So, I mentioned it earlier, but I would use Templar healers to provide minor heroism to the team. I know I said to put it in the Radiant Aura skill, but you could even make it a passive, honestly. I mean, if we want to talk about class identity, then it would make perfect sense for Templars to have heroism somewhere in the Restoring Light skill line. This is because Templars are supposed to be the equivalent of a paladin or cleric from Dungeons & Dragons, and in the 5th edition of D&D, heroism is a spell that every paladin gains access to. Aside from me needing to nerd out for a second there, I think Templars are in a pretty good spot, honestly. Restoring Light seems to be kind of a jack-of-all-trades healer skill line right now, and there isn't really anything I would like to see for Templar healers other than, again, just having them provide heroism. It solves a few issues. And finally, for our classes, we've got the Warden. So there's really only one thing that I wanted to talk about with the Warden, because I think other than this one thing, the Warden is gold standard for healing. Absolutely perfect. But I did want to talk about the maturation passive from the Green Balance skill line. What it does is when you heal someone with any healing ability, you grant them the minor toughness buff, which increases their health by 10%. Not only is the minor toughness buff very strong for both PvE and PvP, but this passive makes it super easy to keep a 100% uptime on the buff. The reason I'm talking about it is because, as of the time of writing this video, there are only 2 sources of minor toughness in the entire game, the Maturation passive and the Warrior Poet set. Because of this, green balance is pretty much required. No, not pretty much, it is required for one of the healers in the group to have. I think a very simple way of making every healer less reliant on green balance while simultaneously retaining its strength is to add minor toughness to the pool of buffs in the scribing system. That way, green balance will still be the most optimal way of providing minor toughness to the group, but it won't be the only way to provide minor toughness to the group. And that was everything we had to talk about today. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember again that these are just my opinions, so let me know what you think of them and tell me yours down in the comments. Obviously, I didn't get a chance to cover every single thing that I would like to see changed in terms of healing, but I wanted to cover the big topics first, and then once we, get those taken care of in the somewhere foreseeable future, we can look at some of the other things as well. Don't forget to check out the link in the description so you can follow me on stuff and join my Discord server. Before we head out, I also want to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters and all of my YouTube members. You guys are seriously the best, and every day I am blown away by your generosity. I think all I've got left to say is that I've been Doc. Take care of yourselves, be good to others. Thank you for being with me for 100 videos, and I will catch y'all in the next one.